and welcome to What's Stopping You? Fostering Female Ambition. My name is Clive Bellingham, and I am the Deputy President of the Institute of Chartered Accountancy of Scotland. So before we move to our next speaker, I'd like to ask the audience a poll question. The poll question is, what is the biggest barrier to your career progression? And the choices are glass ceiling, gender discrimination, pay disparity, being a parent. Interestingly, fluctuating a little bit, the 2 points which are clearly ahead are glass ceiling and being a parent. Almost equal barriers at around 35% of the audience. That's interesting, fascinating. Next up, we have Ainslie van Onselen, CEO of Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand, or CAANZ to many of us. Ainslie, what sort of challenges have you faced along your career, and do the poll results surprise you?
Thanks, Clive. No, not really. I think it's a little bit of everything in that poll, but I think the fact that it said glass ceiling and parent being the number one and number two is probably spot on, I'd say. First, I'd probably like to start reflecting on those top barriers that Sarah discussed in her presentation. In particular, the gaps between men and women on those issues perceived as being a barrier to a person's career. There was such a huge divide in the area of childcare. So 25% of women said that taking time off to work to care for their children was a barrier for their career, compared to 3% of men. As well as being a parent or guardian, 9% of men compared to 25% of women. And that divide, I think, Clive, simply comes down to different lived experiences. There are many women who still live in situations where they are expected to be the primary caregiver. And if you've ever done an unconscious bias session with Harvard, so they're free on the internet. If you do the domesticity one, you'll see why that is. Men and women, we often think that the primary caregiver should be a woman. And that happens either at home or within all of the communities that we live in. In Australia, for example, where I hail from, including those that hold down full-time jobs, women are still doing more in the home than men. We had a recent survey from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and it showed that 62% of women spend 5 or more hours a week on unpaid housework compared to 35% of men. And often it would be more than 5 hours, I'd say. Now, I've been really fortunate in my own personal life that in my family, parenting and domestic duties are shared equally, and they have been since the get-go, since we had our 2 daughters. So my husband and I both really benefited from an arrangement where we've both been carers of our two girls, now 14 and 16. But when they were really young, my husband, Peter, he mushed as many carrots and changed as many nappies as I did. And, to this day, our daughters, who are now teenagers, you might even hear them in the background tonight if they're yelling, they share a very, very close and special bond with their dad. And this is why I wrote an article recently for The Australian, it's our big masthead here over in Australia. And I talked about our own data at CAANZ, where we found that just 18% of men surveyed had taken a career break for parental leave. And that was in contrast to 76% of women. So they're pretty stark statistics. And there's often a phrase that we use when we talk about gender equality or on International Women's Day, which is you can't be what you can't see. And it's often explained as to why we see less women taking on careers traditionally dominated by men. But I think it could also be used to describe men and their relationship with parental leave. In particular, men who are in the early stages of their careers, if they don't see male leaders and colleagues taking a career break to care for their children, then how can they ever feel comfortable doing it themselves? Taking that, early walk to the lift as you've got to pick up kids, for example. So it's not just about relieving from women the burden of sole parenting so they can be more empowered to participate in the workforce. I think there's also a societal advantage as well, ultimately not only just fixing the pay gap, but also the relationship that men can have with their children. And if they choose to take up parental leave or work more flexibly, in a family-friendly way, I truly believe that men have a more stronger relationship in their family life. And it's something I feel very, very strongly about. men experiencing that rich and rewarding benefits of hand-on parenting. And I really don't think it can be underestimated in terms of empowering more women to progress through their career as well. I might just move sort of on a slightly personal sort of front. So in terms of the challenges that I've faced, I can relate to the survey's findings on confidence being an issue for women, which is why I believe mentoring is really important, particularly for young women. What mentoring does is it kind of gives you the confidence to move forward, knowing that someone else has been there before you and that they back you. When I was a young partner at a law firm in my very early 20s, I needed that confidence boost when I had a very large trial matter that was coming to a head and I was about to go on parental leave. And I asked my partners in that law firm, I was the only female partner, whether I could go on parental leave or when I could go on parental leave. I'd like to be able to work part-time because I was really living and breathing this case, which was about to go to a jury trial. Now, it was at that point where I really faced a brick wall of inflexibility. I heard comments to the effect of, look, we've tried that before with other women in the office and it just didn't work. So I was given two options, the option of coming back to work full-time for 6 months or that the case would be taken away from me if I wanted to have my full 12 months of parental leave. And I contemplated that situation for a long time. I spoke with my husband about it as well, about which option I would choose. And then I stopped and I questioned, well, why did I think there was only two options here? And that's when I contemplated setting up my own practice. And I spoke to a range of people, a range of mentors, people who'd set up their own businesses. And I realized it wasn't an insurmountable challenge. I just needed to break it down step by step and then have the confidence to sort of step off that cliff, so to speak, of setting up my own business. And I still remember that day when I came back to my all-male partners and said, look, thanks so much for those two options, but I found a third better option, and that's setting up my own shop. And I had a soft landing. A lot of my clients came with me, not just that one. And not only was I more profitable working on my own than with my fellow partners, but I got to spend time with my gorgeous young family, and I got to do it on my own terms and with flexibility. So in one respect, I have been very fortunate to be in a situation where my career progression has not been hampered by the stereotypes within my own home, but I have felt stereotypes outside of the home. But I've been able to push past those challenges with the help of mentors who've helped me instill in me a sense of self-belief, as well as, of course, it's always good to have a lot of ambition, a lot of hard work, and a bit of luck doesn't go astray either.